to episode 10 of Huddle Up, and a very special episode. We got two special guests today. With us is former Red Raider and Green Bay Packer John Kuhn, coming live from Wisconsin, and we got Dan Walsh, linebacker on that same team with John. Thanks, guys, for being here.
My pleasure. My pleasure. This is going to be a lot of fun.
I want to also give a shout out to our sponsor, Maxie's. Thanks for your support. And a reminder to everybody, April 11th and 12th, the spring game. Go to RR4L to register for the spring game. And the alumni reunion should be a great time. And please subscribe to our YouTube channel and also follow us on Facebook.
I got my first question as I thought about this past week is, so you're a linebacker, you're a running back. Do you guys butt heads a few times during the practice sessions?
Too many times that I would like to count, man. It was always a challenge for me, obviously, right? The thing that I struggled with was, you got a 250-pound fullback coming at you. So obviously you want to go at the legs, right? But his thighs are like the size of a tree trunk, right? And so I go for those. But the problem was when you bring the heat and you're coming in and trying to bring everything that you have to match up with him, the thing that he had is he could juke you out of your pants. And so that was a deadly combo. So there was some times where many times he would win that battle for sure,
John, where did you come from? Like, what got you to Ship, John? What was the thing that got you to go to Shippensburg?
It was one of those things. Rocky Rees and Jeff Nixon, right? Like, I mean, I think we were blessed. That class that came in 2000, we had it so good, and we didn't know, right? At a time when PSAC football was really, continuing to take off, a lot of really good players around the PSAC. When you talk about LaRon McCoy and Jari Evans and everybody that we had on our Shippensburg team and guys out there in Cal that were, transferring from D1 teams, we had a coaching staff, and we had a coaching staff of some serious talent. When you talk about Jeff Nixon, Coach Mack, Rocky Rees, I mean, they were a talented group, and they were great at recruiting, and they knew exactly how to push buttons. And I had verbally committed to a scholarship at Richmond, and I was going to go down there. Unfortunately, the way college was done back then was a lot of over promising and under delivering by the schools. So they had what they felt was 3 running backs that they were going to offer, with hoping that 2 would take it, maybe just 1 would take it, and we all 3 took it. And I ended up being the odd man out, so I lost my scholarship when it came close to National Signing Day with Richmond. And the backup plan was PSAC schools. Where was I going to go? So I started making the rounds, and I did an official visit at Bloomsburg, an official visit at Westchester. And Shippensburg, I didn't even do an official visit. I just came up for the day. Really? With my head coach from Shippensburg, or from Dover, drove up with him, met with Rocky Rees, and it was great. Rocky was like, "Hey, I'm going to give you the football. You're going to carry the football here, and we're going to make you the centerpiece of this offense." And I thought, wow, this is really cool. I mean, pretty good backup plan to have here at Shippensburg. And Jeff Nixon was kind of the guy who recruited me when I was in high school, and he was relentless. I mean, Dan, Jeff Nixon and how relentless he was with FCA coaching, and he was just that way with recruiting too. So, I mean, he didn't let me go 48 hours without hearing from him. John, wondering if you made a decision yet, and in the back of my mind, I always knew, this place was far enough away that it felt like I was leaving home to do something, but it was close enough where I also felt secure that, if it didn't work at Shippensburg, I wasn't far enough from home that I would be missing anything too terribly there. So it was really the best of both worlds at a time when, I didn't have a whole lot of time to make a decision.
Yeah. Wow. That team, that's funny. I mean, Dan, you led the team in tackles 3 years in a row. John, you got all the rushing records going on, but then you look at the other guys on that team, which you don't hear a lot about. I mean, other than maybe Brent, but give me some background on some of those guys that made up that team. It looks like it's a high-powered offense, but that was a pretty much a dominant defense too.
Listen, I think, just to follow up on John's comments there, thank God for Jeff Nixon, right? That he got Kuhn to Shippensburg, number 1. And thank God we ran the wing tee, because, the offense ran through Kuhn, and it was just it was incredible to watch. But yeah, I would, we as far as the defense goes, I mean, we were from top to bottom, from front to back. D linemen, we had guys like, Boa Cabold and some other guys on the line. Then we had our linebackers were myself, Chris Leonetti, and Frank Duffy, who were all at one point all the linebackers. And then we had an awesome secondary of guys like Antonio Williams, Mike Street, who was I think he was the defensive player of the year for us as voted by the team our senior year, and Brent Grimes, who was what, a 10, 12-year vet in the NFL, and so I think we were ranked like in the top 5 for defense most of the year. And so it was really the combination of both sides of the ball that were, really solid on both ends. I'm a massive Eagles fan, Kuhn will tell you. And you saw that last night, right? Both sides of the ball running. It was basically what we were, right? Running the football and a strong defense with the way the Eagles performed. That was the way we played on both sides of the ball back then, and it's just we had probably, what, Kuhn, would you say 20 seniors on the team? Something around about that. Our class was really, really
Yeah.
solid. We stuck together for a long time, and that helped.
It was over 20 seniors that we had from our class. And the real magical part of it was rolling into that senior year. We knew we had stacked the deck, right? I mean, we did have Ryan Hoffman, a defensive end, who was just an absolute monster at the time. I mean, we had size and athleticism. And then by the time our senior year rolled around, we had experience. I mean, we only lost Ron Johnson, who was a terrific defensive end in his own right, but we lost him, and he was about the only person we really lost that junior year, right? And everybody else who was starting was coming back. And you add into that Tony Gomez, who was starting to play a little bit of quarterback for us in relief of Rick Henshaw, and the kind of danger that he brought with his legs. And the wide receiver position was starting to open up a little bit too, because we were a little run heavy, I would say, our first couple years of starting, Dan. But then, when we started getting the big play impact of a Patrick Ferguson or a Tim Devaney, we always ran 2 tight ends very well, with Brian Sequel and Joe Gamble. And we had multiple tight ends that we could throw out there, big, strong tight ends too, which allowed us to run and do play action. But when we brought the wide receivers into it, that's when the offense, I think, really took off and hit a level that was on the same level as the defense. Quite frankly, our defense was ranked top 10 nationally nearly every single year. And we kind of had a script. We had a script where our defense was going to limit the team from scoring a lot of points, and our offense was going to possess the football. The one thing we were missing was that big play. And once we started getting that out of the wide receivers, that's when, we knew we could be dangerous.
You guys ended up over that 4-year window, 32-13, which is pretty remarkable 4-year run. You got to the NCAA tournament, what, 2004?
Yeah.
Yeah. And just talk about that run. Maybe that's that senior year where, like you said, everything was clicking, and some of the highlights maybe of what happened that year.
Yeah, I can only remember the lowlights, really, Dan. I don't know about you, but I can only remember the only thing we wanted to do was beat Indiana, right?
Oh.
The only thing we wanted to do was beat IUP. And 2 years I can remember Rocky telling me in the locker room after that game, man, I get my 2 best teams, and both times we got to play IUP at IUP.
Yeah.
And we lost that one our senior year. It was a close game. That was the only thing that kept us from going undefeated. We beat Westchester down in Westchester last game of the season. They won the East, we won the West. We called ourselves PSAC champs because we won the West and beat the East champs on the last game of the season, kind of like they used to have the PSAC championship game back in the day. We called ourselves the PSAC champs. And then we had to face Westchester automatically next game. That was tough. That was tough having to beat them 2 times in a row.
Right.
And unfortunately, they got the best of us. I mean, I really only think of those 2 games from that senior year. But I do recall going, toe to toe with Edinboro, right? Matt Phillips had transferred up there, and they were supposed to be this team that was on the rise and was going to, take us down a peg. That year, we didn't really struggle with them. We didn't really have a problem there. There were some other teams that we took to the woodshed and just really beat up on. It's really those 2 games that I think about where we lost. Those are the ones that stick around for that whole season. And again, I want to go back to how many seniors there were starting on that team and everything that we had put into it, because it wasn't just what we put into that season. It was what we put into our entire careers. I mean, we're talking about guys, and most of us redshirted. That's why there were so many seniors on that team, because most of us did redshirt. So you're talking about 4.5 years of putting into that program, culminating in what that season was.
Yeah, and you wonder nowadays how, with the transfer portal, with NIL, how do you build that? I know my team in '81 was similar to your team, and that's guys who were together for 4 years. We had a bunch of juniors and seniors, and you wonder how you can maintain that cohesiveness in a team going forward with the way it is now.
It's tough. I mean, I think they're still trying to figure it out, right? The D1 level the whole way down through, and Division Two is even tougher, right? Like how do you figure out how they're gonna, if they don't have a good year or they're not playing, if they're even if they're redshirted, they may go to the next place down the road, that's an hour away. So that's a tough one to figure out. Even when we were there, can you think about it? Like through the 4.5 years we were there, I mean, there were so many people that came and were there a year and then just fizzled out of football in general. To add in NIL, it would just make it just a crazy scene, I think, at this, in the current state of things right now.
I think it's got to be player driven. Honestly, our team was player driven. None of us really got big scholarships to go to school there. It was a running joke on the team, how much scholarship Shippensburg had compared to IUP and Slippery Rock.
It's still a joke.
And hey, and Rocky
Yeah.
played it well. Rocky played it well. He used that as motivation, that we were the blue collar guys from around the state, right? Pennsylvania is known as a blue collar state. You got coal workers and you got steel workers and you got, every farmers and everything in between. And yet, we're talking about these other state schools and how much money they had an advantage over us. So we saw ourselves as the true blue collar workers of the PSAC, and we took a lot of pride in that. And I started thinking about the 16 practices over 2 weeks that you would have, or 16 practices a week, 2 weeks straight, that 3 a day, 3 a day, 2 a day, the way that situation would play out during training camp. And I'm telling you, I think that's stuff that has to be learned and appreciated by the team, by the players, because I played with a lot of guys in the NFL that would not have gone through those Shippensburg training camps. They wouldn't have made it through. They would have made the team because they would have been that athletic. They wouldn't have done the camp. They wouldn't have physically have been able to push themselves through it. Dan would have black and blue marks on both of his hamstrings behind his knee.
You're going to bring that
up. Because both of his hamstrings were pulled. This is real, actual stuff we're talking about here. We had people passing out on the field, getting knocked out on the field. And we would just roll the drill down 15 yards. I mean, things that the NCAA and the NFL would look at now and say, hey, we absolutely cannot do this. And to some extent, there are some safety precautions that are smart that you do need to take. But our players embraced that. Our players admired that and brought that out of each other. And when they challenged each other too, all right, we would challenge each other to who's going to work out the hardest, who's going to train the hardest. I remember I came in as a freshman. Dan says 250. I didn't weigh 250 till my senior year. I was 222, came in freshman year. Dan's got 3 plates on the bar, maxing out. I can't do that yet. I was still 17 trying to max out with these guys. And but I was starting at the bottom, and I looked at, Goodman, and I said, okay, I gotta get as strong as this guy. Right. And I saw Leonard Weaver and I said, okay, I got to work out like this guy. And then before you knew it, we were those guys, Dan and I, and we've required that out of the rest of our teammates.
A lot of us had chips on our shoulders, right? And there were a lot of people that maybe had an experience like him where they thought they were going to play 1AA or maybe even Division I, and maybe they didn't choose Shippensburg as their number one. But once we got there, we kind of took it upon ourselves, like, hey, we didn't, that we were overlooked, and so we took that personally. I think a lot of us.
I also think we got lucky because we had a lot of guys that actually loved the game of football. It wasn't about what came with football. It wasn't about the attention. It wasn't about the scholarships. It wasn't about the travel or anything else. It was strictly, we played football because we saw an end. We saw an end to our football career, and it was when we were done playing at Shippensburg. Hand to God, I never thought I was playing in the NFL. We saw our last game as that senior day at Shippensburg, right? We saw that being our last game of playing competitive football, and most of us embraced that and tried to wring out that wash rag of every last snap that we could get. And because we had the group, like the group majority, that was the group think of the team then, right? Then if you didn't have that same appreciation, if you didn't have that same love for the game, you weren't there. You weren't welcomed. We would
Yeah.
you would quit. You would be one of those guys that quit during training camp. Rocky said he never had to cut during training camp. And what, we had to go from 120 to 90. He never had to cut because we would always weed them out,
Yep.
just with the way that we demanded certain standards out of you, and one of those standards were your appreciation for the game.
What made that group? I mean, in 4 years, that much winning. Obviously, Rocky was a great coach, and I never really knew Rocky. But can you talk about his impact?
Yeah, I think what made Rocky so special was he could relate, right? He was a player himself in the PSAC. He understood what it meant to be not just a PSAC player, but a great PSAC player. He was a phenomenal player back in his day at a great school in Westchester with a storied PSAC history. And I think he knew that, and he understood the relationship of football, school, family at that level, right? It's different in Division I. Dan had a bunch of buddies who played at Penn State. My roommate had a bunch of buddies that played either at Maryland or Penn State. And when we go visit them, they had a different feel for the way that their program was than ours. Rocky had a great way of making the main thing in Division II, and that is your grades, your teammates, and the team, right? And you hold all of them to a really high standard. And being able to relate with something, whether it was with comedy or whether it was with, just bold truth. I can remember part of his pitch to get me to come to Shippensburg was, John, we are 70 miles from York. We are close enough that you can keep your girlfriend at York while go to school here, but far enough away to have another girlfriend here at the same time. He said 2 girlfriends while you're going to school here. It doesn't get any better than that. And I don't know if he was joking. He was
Words of wisdom.
probably half serious, but it was that type of relationship that he had with all the players. It wasn't just me. It was all the way down the line. The way he used to yell at Cantaloupe for his ridiculous tattoos. The things that he would say to make that team feel like he was their father. He was a part of the family, that they were a part of his family. It's something I'll never forget.
Well, I think what you said there is he was like a second father figure for a lot of us, and we didn't want to let him down at the end of the day, and to me, like I was, primarily on the, obviously on the defensive side, and we were lucky enough that Coach Mack, who's been the head coach for years, was our defensive coordinator when I was there. And then Mike Burkett, who is the D coordinator now, came in as my linebackers coach probably halfway through my career. So he was there my last 2 years. And those guys Mike Burkett knows everything there is to know about playing defense, and he just really breaks down the film and really taught me a lot from that perspective. But Coach Mack was just he was just all intensity all the time, and you wanted to play. He was a reverent leader, man. You wanted to play for him, and just like you would die for that guy. And Kuhn, I don't remember that time we were in the locker room and he like started doing the heartbeat thing, and everyone just like went buck wild, and we went nuts because we all were like one, and all of our heartbeats beat it as one. And he brought that up, and we kept doing that the rest of our senior year, and I'll never forget it, man. And he's probably doing the same type of thing for the team now, and he's just an easy guy to want to win every game for sure.
Yeah.
I also think it's a good thing to point out. I pointed out all the coaches, right? And they all had a unique way of being a part of things, all the way up and down, whether you're talking about Tony Iruli, or you're talking about Mac, or you're talking about Burkett. Jeff Nixon played an integral part of helping us grow as men, demanding other things outside of football, like attendance at FCA meetings and things to that nature. Checking in on study halls and making us run when we thought we got away with sneaking out of study halls, right? So many different things that as 17 to 21-year-old men, you're still boys, right? You're at that changing period of going from a boy to a man, and the way they all held you accountable during that period, and in their own ways, right? It was just, I thought the coaching staff at a Division II level, I can't imagine it being any better. right? Coach Lee on the offensive side, and the way that he really created that bond with the offensive linemen, the way those linemen were so tight, they were thick as thieves. You couldn't get them away from one another. And sometimes it was just a little goofy because you knew if one lineman was going to be around, they were all going to be around. It was going to be stinky, not enough room, all the food's going to be eaten, right? And they were all going to be there. So it was like, it's just one of those things, but that's the way that he had the linemen to be. Coach Powell with the wide receivers and his jokes and walking up and farting around you every time he was near you, right? And just making the whole room, oh, here's Coach Powell again, acting a fool. So it was a perfect cast of each one of these coaches bringing a unique thing that every player appreciated and every player really kind of needed at that period in their life.
You guys experienced something similar to what I did. We lost our last game of the year in the NCAA tournament. When I realized that was the end of football for me, that was tough.
I think about that game against Westchester a lot because those days were special, man. College to me, those college days, those college games, those teams that we had, the teammates that I still keep in contact with now, those meant more to me than the games that I won in the NFL with the teams that I won in the NFL. And I love all my teams that I've been on all the way through the NFL, but those college teams were something special.
You know, John obviously went on and had an incredible NFL career, but for guys like me, that was my last game, right? And it's you know you're going to miss the sport, but I think like John described, you're going to miss what you had in the locker room, and I still miss it, you know. And we stay. I mean, the cool thing is we all stay in touch, right? I stay in touch with a lot of my high school teammates. I tell my kids all the time, right? Like they're 11, 10, and 8, and I say like it's sports are the best because like you see like hey Uncle John or Uncle Tony, like these guys that I played high school and college football with are my best friends to this day 20 some years later, and that's what I miss now. And so it's not just you're not just ending that part of your career as far as the sport goes, but it's really the camaraderie that you had in the locker room.
Yeah. There's also that element of competition. You just can't get away from
Yep.
competing, and it doesn't really matter what it is. You could be playing darts in the bar, and everybody that I've talked to is still like kind of desires that competition.
We were so competitive, and it didn't stop with football. I mean, when you talk about a great offense versus a great defense at practice, that was one thing. Spring practices, they had to. I would pay money to sit in the stands to watch those spring practices again because they were like playing. They were like we played games. It was like we were playing a game on the field, and that had to be incredible. But we had intramural basketball teams where, on the football team, there was like 3 different intramural basketball teams. And when they matched up, man, we were beating the shit out of each other, in that center. So it was one of those things where we just went at it. And on the weekends, playing video games, or if we were, going out and do whatever we did, tossing the beanbag around, it was as competitive as it got. But even more than that, even more than the competition, I think it was, again, I go back to how difficult those training camp practices were. The demands of a Division II athlete, right? We used to have a saying, the smaller the school, the bigger the heart, right? The demands that we put in without the rewards that you might see at the bigger programs in Division I. I mean, the biggest crowd, I'll never forget, we played in that playoff game, Dan, and when the referees at midfield had microphones that came out the PA system, we all looked around because we had never heard anything like that. There was 10,000 fans. There was 10,000 fans at that game. That was the biggest game any of us had ever played in front of. It was that was our crowning reward. That was our crowning moment, and that's as big as it got, right? We went through all that stuff when you talk about waking up at 5 a.m. and running at the gym, and then doing the weights, and then the whole spring session was just brutal. You go into the training camp before the season starts, and then the whole long season, and then back into weights again. We did all that stuff because we loved it and we grinded it together. So when you do all those tough things with somebody, you can trust them, right? So our friendships are built off of, I know if I need somebody to come help me move out of my house, I know I can call Dan, right? I might have to pay for a flight to get him out here, but he's going to help me get the stuff out of my house, right? He might get a hernia when he does it too. You never really know. But it's
True story. That happened.
It's that type of trust that you have. And I don't just have it with Dan. I have it all the way down the line, right? I'm talking about with Aaron Dykes, who was a couple years behind us, Frank Duffy, who was a couple years behind us, Dave Wilkerson, who was a couple years behind us, all the way down that line.
Let's jump ahead a little bit. We talk about maybe the next step to the pros, John. And what's that transition like from Division II college to NFL, and how did that all transpire?
Well, a lot of luck, honestly. There was a lot of luck involved in that. And really, it's just kind of the chopping wood mentality that was put into place at Shippensburg was just what I hung on to. I mean, by NFL standards, I sucked when I got into the NFL. It was bad. I mean, it was brutal. I can remember my first training camp, laying up at night and calling my now wife, but girlfriend at the time, saying, I cannot block anybody here. I don't know what I'm doing. And the technique in the NFL versus the technique that we learned at Shippensburg, which was all cut blocks, completely different. So I had to completely learn how to play the game at a time when you were trying to show these teams what you already learned in college, what you are capable of doing. So I was learning while practicing, right? Which is different than what most guys were doing. Very, very difficult. But I will say again, where I seemed to win out, especially early on in my career, was when guys couldn't stay healthy or guys couldn't stay on the field. Guys would get injured. John's here, throw him in. And I would go in there and do it. I was never the first choice. My first 3 or 4 years, I was never the first choice. But that third choice, that fourth choice, you're going to get an opportunity. And if you're constantly, there available for them to pull on you when you get that opportunity, that was seen as a good sign. I mean, my first year coming out of college, the fullbacks were ranked, right? Number 1 was Zach Tuiasosopo. Number 2 was Brandon Joe. My first year, the Steelers brought in Zach Tuiasosopo. He ended up getting hurt, couldn't stay on couldn't stay healthy. I ended up staying on practice squad. The second year they brought in Brandon Joe, same thing. Brandon Joe was incredible. You talk about a guy that could hit a linebacker and knock him flat out just about any time he wanted to. He packed a punch, but he couldn't stay healthy either. I mean, I guess when you hit that hard, it takes a toll on your body as well. So Brandon Joe couldn't make it through that training camp. I ended up making that team as well. So it was just one of those things where if you stay around long enough, if you find a way to sweep enough floors and stay in the building, you might figure out a lesson or two. You might learn a thing or two, and that's what I did. And by the time I learned enough little nuances to the game in the NFL, I became a pretty decent player.
Well, I mean, it's impressive. I can't imagine playing at Lambeau and they're calling your name out. I mean, that's something that is just kind of, how did that evolve? Like all of a sudden, you're in the game and you carry the ball, you hear everybody screaming Kuhn. How'd that evolve?
Well, it's a very easy name to pronounce. It's just a very easy thing to do. But I remember when the Shippensburg band used to do it. I remember when they used to do it when we were playing there at Shippensburg, which was kind of cool because with 3,000 fans and 1,000 of them being the band, that was like a third of our stadium was doing it. So it was a heck of a lot of fun. But that was probably, I would say it took off the year we went to the Super Bowl, and I was having a hell of a season that year. In fact, we did something crazy there. We kept 3 fullbacks on the roster and 2 halfbacks. And then our best halfback got hurt first quarter of the first game of the season, done for the year. So now we got 1 halfback on the roster, 3 fullbacks. I had to play halfback. So I was asked to do a lot of different things that year. And we were like squeaking by. We were a good team, but we were squeaking by here, squeaking by there. And then at the end of the season, we played the Giants, and our offense was just on fire. Aaron Rodgers had come back from an injury, and I had 3 touchdowns in the game, but Aaron threw for like 450 yards. And it was one of those things where our team couldn't be stopped, right? I was lucky enough to play in a couple offenses throughout my career where you hit spurts like that. At Shippensburg, we had a little bit of that, and in the pros, we had a little bit of that. When you're on one of those offenses that you just can't be stopped, it really is a lot of fun, and I think the fans had a lot of fun during that time.
You guys went to the Pro Bowl. You went as a guest. Is that right, Dan and John, when you were playing?
No, I wasn't there. I wasn't at the game, but
I saw a picture that said you took the picture.
yeah, don't know where that came from. I got the picture from somebody, and that's a running joke, man. That's been for I don't know how many years, Kuhn, right? Like,
I don't know. I don't know how these urban legends start.
no
It's
idea.
so much fun. And the urban
I
legends
bought all
about
in. I was all in.
Brand,
urban legends about
I must
Dan
have
are
found
the
it.
best.
I must have found it on like what a website or whatever, and posted on Facebook saying, "Hey, it's cool to see my two teammates meeting up at the Pro Bowl." And then some lady tagged it as like me being the photographer. But I will say, we had a lot of opportunity to go up to Green Bay and Pittsburgh when he was there, and New Orleans also, and to see. Early days, even when he first got to the Packers, we go to the bar and like not many people even knew who we were or what we were doing. 5 years later, the entire stadium is screaming his name, and it was just really cool to see, to know the work that, and he always did it when we were at Ship, like the work that he put in to get to that level, like is more than I can promise you anybody else put in on that team, and to see that over that period of time was really cool, man. I was very proud of him. It was awesome to see for sure.
Do you see it as, it's funny. And once again, talking to Mac, he's talking to me about what their practice schedules are like now. And I went up to camp a couple times last year to watch a practice. And the NCAA basically doesn't let him do, the stuff that we used to do, 2-a-days and, grinding it out in the spring and things like that. I often wonder, how does the player improve? Because so much of it is half speed or walk through kind of drills. I mean, that grind was really a big part of making you a better player.
Yeah, I think I'd always had a work ethic in me because I'd always just loved football. And if somebody told me the greatest compliment I ever had was my strength coach in high school was asked to do an interview one time, and he said, "Well, I can explain John like this. If I spit on the floor over there and I told him to lick it up because it would make him a better football player, he would do it." And I mean, I wasn't that crazy, but there's some truth in, everything a coach had ever told me. It didn't matter which coach it was. Every single thing a coach had ever told me, I had stored away, I had banked it, and I used it. If they were telling me something about the game and about a check or about some film or about a player, I memorized it. I listened to everything that they said there. If it was about training, if there was a certain way to train, and training has gotten specialized now to the nth degree. And there's a reason why athletes can practice less time now, and still be these incredible athletes out there. It's because the training has been so specialized. That didn't really get started until we were finishing, right?
Yeah.
When we were ending our time at Shippensburg is when this specialized training really started taking off for athletes. And I don't know. I don't know if I want that I mean, what they have now as kids that's available to them, it's unbelievable. And in fact, I have a couple training facilities out here in Wisconsin for young athletes that we do great things with. But man, there was something about the way at Dover and even Shippensburg with those archaic gyms with the rusty plates that you would put on the bars, and the floors that you knew just had mold in the carpet, and the walls that would get condensation on the inside because it was so humid from people sweating and everything. That is everything that we were. That is the team that we were meant to be. And I don't think we are the team that we were if we didn't have that background, if we didn't have that type of way of going about things. And the gym at Shippensburg is much nicer now. It's a very beautiful gym.
It's the one they
About the
promised
weight
to us
room.
in 2000 that they got 20 years later.
Yeah. So the athletes now, I think they got to be a little more self-derived. They got to push themselves a little bit more known. They probably got to watch what they eat at Reisner and Kreiner and everywhere else, and a little bit better than what we did. And that's got to be part of it, because it didn't matter what we ate at those dining halls. Rocky was getting it right back out of you when you went on that practice.
Dan, any thoughts on that?
Man, it's like just going through what we went through. It changed, and I think it changed our senior year, right? King really had all the changes as far as practices go. And I think it was good from a keeping people healthy perspective, but you did lose a little bit of that edge that you gained from going through all that you went through.
Yeah. That was really all I had. I mean, I was going to ask you a question about, the new players coming in and joining Mac's program. What would you say to a new player? it's very, like you said, it's just very different. You guys had that work ethic. You guys had that bond as a team. And it's hard to build that now. What would you say to a player coming in to find success?
No, I would say simply when you get to be an old fart like me and Dan, and you look back on your playing days, um, you're not going to give one shit about an NIL. You're not going to care about a Nike sneaker that you might have had at one point in time, some clothes that you may have had, a game system. You're going to care about the memories that you created, and the best memories that you can create is through achieving something as a team. I truly believe that you'll have individual success, but that team success is something that you will turn around and you will remember for the rest of your life, and that'll be the memory that you cherish from your college days. And if you don't create those, you won't have the cherished memories that I have, and I will feel bad for you if you miss out on that opportunity that's standing right in front of you.
Nice. I'm glad you did not include me. I'm glad you didn't include me when you said old farts like us.
Well, Dan's been old since he was 22. He's been telling me for years, ever since he had the double black blue hamstrings.
Listen, I agree with everything he just said. It's some of these kids coming in, maybe it wasn't their first choice, right? But Division II football in the PSAC is legit football, man. And of the people that go to even Division I, 99.9% do not go to the NFL, right? And so it's not all about jumping for individual goals. It's for accomplishing something as a team. And again, these are my friends for life, right? And we all stay in touch. And if after 2 years, John could have easily transferred to somewhere and played at a Penn State. There's no doubt about that, right? But he stayed and he stuck it out. And you see him, he had an NFL career that, again, 99.9% of people coming out of Division I don't have in the NFL, right? And so he defied the odds. And would that have happened if he transferred? I don't know. It was all part of the plan that he didn't, and he stayed, and it worked out for us and it worked out for him.
Right.
Well, I'd also like to point out, I want all the kids to make as much money as they can. I want them to get the best scholarship they can, and I want them to keep working so that they get better scholarships. Dan was an example of that, got more scholarship as he went along at Shippensburg, right? I never went back to the table and asked for more money, so that just makes me dumb and Dan smart. But that's one thing you can do is you can go back and say, hey, I need a little bit more skin for this book over here that I got to pay $500 at the bookstore for. So I want all the players to get their scholarship that they can, and I want them to get all the NIL that they can. I just believe in my heart that they will cherish their time. And their time will be more valuable. They'll be wiser. They'll be stronger, and they will make bonds and friendships that are lifelong if they commit to the right thing first. And the scholarship and the NIL, and that'll all come with success, right? All of those things come with success, but it starts with buying in and trying to do the thing as a team. And if you can do that appropriately, everybody will reap the rewards.
Anything else you guys have? Go ahead, John.
Those highlight videos that you have of old players, can we do more of those? Yeah. I want Dan Walsh highlight tape. I want a Ryan Hoffman. I want a Ryan Grog highlight tape. I want the highlight tapes of everybody. That was awesome.
We have Howie Guarini is putting those together for me. The challenge is getting the video footage, and he's pulling them together, and he's trying to do more and more.
The one you need is Brent Grimes. That kid is the most athletic human I've ever seen. John is the best football player I've seen. Brent is by far. John, you've seen some great athletes, obviously, but Brent Grimes, unbelievable, man. Unbelievable.
I said for years, we would watch something happen on the football field, and guys would be like, that's the only person that could ever do that. And I'd always say, nope, there's one other one. And then he started doing backflips and making interceptions in the NFL. And I said, that's who I've been telling you guys about.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. I do appreciate it. And taking the time today. I know it's a busy schedule. We're going to have Coach Mike Birkin on our next program. And, we're going to hear from him about what these recruits are like that they brought in.